afternoon. My name is Krista Knigge. I'm the administrator in the Division of Agricultural Development at the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection. Thanks for being here today to talk about rural prosperity, sustainability, and innovation in Wisconsin. We've got some great panelists here. We've got some questions that we'll be talking through, but feel free to participate and ask your questions in the chat. And we'll tee things up by giving you an introduction to the panel. As I said, my name is Krista Knigge. I grew up on a dairy farm and cash crop farm in rural Wisconsin. Omro is my hometown, just outside of Oshkosh. And I work now in the Department of Agriculture, Trade and Consumer Protection, helping to grow Wisconsin agriculture. So this is certainly a topic that my team is engaged in. And I'd also like to introduce the rest of the panel members. If you would go around and just introduce yourself, maybe talk about your organization and some of the work that you do and how it relates to rural prosperity, and maybe talk about what a day in the life is for you. So let's start. Seyoum, if you want to kick things off and give an introduction.
Thank you, Krista. And hello, everyone. My name is Seyoum Mengesha. I'm the Director of Business Development for the state of Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. My responsibility is statewide, very much work with the rural and urban communities. Currently, I'm working with 18 organizations, far north in Wisconsin, west, east, and the south. These organizations are community-based. Some of them are economic development organizations, and some are community. And we've been working with them since June 2012, and we have come to enjoy bringing new programs to businesses around the state, minority businesses, women-owned, veterans, and LGBT. And we support, as WEDC, these organizations to bring their services to the businesses. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And John, why don't you go next?
Okay, my name is John Rosenow. I'm a dairy farmer in Buffalo County. We milk 600 cows and we have 20 employees. 12 of them are from Mexico. And in 2001, a group of us farmers, along with a Spanish teacher, went to Mexico to learn the language because this was a new thing. And while we were there, we met with some of the families of our employees. And it was such a powerful experience that when we got home, I joined with the Spanish teacher, Sean Duvall, and we formed an organization called Puentes Bridges, and which links the dairy farmers that have employees with the families that are still back in Mexico. So it's an intercultural experience. We've gone on trips to Mexico every year except last year, and it has been a powerful experience.
Thank you, John. Gary, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
So, but I pay my taxes using the name Gary Besaw. My name is Gary Besaw, and I had served 15 years on our tribal legislature for the Menominee Nation, with several of those terms as our tribal chairman. And I noticed as I traveled around to certain farming communities, as well as traveled the United States, I was very envious of certain communities or tribal communities that had their own indigenous or their own food systems in place, whether it was an accompanying cooperative or just the ability to be sustainable themselves. Well, after I had completed my service as our chairman and serving on our legislature, I wanted to be able to work in a food service or redevelop an agriculture and food systems for our tribe, and really look at what we had in place many, many years ago that got us through. We don't have a creation story. We've been here 12, 15,000 years. So I was interested in finding out what were those types of foods, how did we grow them, and what was that exchange, what was that system we had in place, that food chain system for bartering, trading with others. So of course, there were others here that knew that. So we are looking at doing that type of recreation. I'm the director of, we're almost 3 years old now, the director of the Department of Agriculture and Food Systems. And I'm also the director of our food distribution program here on the reservation. So my day deals with helping individuals that are looking at setting up and working their farms to try to help them, as well as looking at setting up food systems and that full supply chain using all types of different grants, donations, money that I rustle up somehow, God knows how, as well as working on setting up our own food code. So much of that regulation piece also comes into my day. And like we're sitting here today, much of it is spent on Zoom. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Gary. And rounding out our panel, Laura, go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Hi, everybody. I'm Laura Phoenix. I'm the Executive Director of Farm Table Foundation. We're a nonprofit in Amory, Wisconsin. That's in Polk County in Western Wisconsin. And our mission is to grow local food culture. And the way that we do that is threefold. We have an arts gallery where we can highlight local art that relates to our mission and furthers our mission. And we have a really robust calendar of programs and events and training opportunities. And then our primary expression of our mission to build local food culture is a nonprofit local food restaurant. And we serve about 24,000 people annually. And it is delicious food almost entirely from within 40 miles of Amory, Wisconsin, really focusing on small regenerative family farms. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. So we have a very diverse panel representing some different aspects of different organizations that may have an influence in rural communities and influencing rural prosperity. So I wanted to start off our discussion by having some panel members talk about some of the success stories that you each have had as it relates to supporting or promoting rural prosperity in Wisconsin. And Laura, let's turn it back to you. You talked about feeding 24,000 people. I know you talk about putting Polk County on the menu. Talk a little bit more about that.
Well, when folks come to the restaurant, I always ask them if they've been there before. And if they haven't, then I go into a little bit of a conversation about what our mission is and explain that over 80% of what's on our menu comes from within 40 miles of Farm Table Foundation restaurant in Amory. And that really distills the taste of Polk County. And I think it's a point of pride for the locals who have this endeavor happening in their community. And it's also a point of intrigue and education as well for the tourists and visitors that come through. They make up about half of our business truly throughout the course of the year. So both audiences are really important. And I think that mission of focusing and featuring Polk County produce and proteins hits the mark for both audiences.
You mentioned that you've got some seasonal farmers and some main farmers. Talk a little bit about how you engage and work with your farmers.
Yeah, we have a core group of a dozen or more farms who we consistently source from. Of course, most of what we source is seasonal, right? Even if it's beef or chicken, these things have seasons too. So we source year round and whenever possible preserved so that we can serve things out of season that were still harvested at the peak of seasonality locally. We have, you know, some more niche producers like mushroom farmers and berry farmers. Our berry farmers, of course, have a pretty narrow season. And then we're able to source different kinds of cheese from local dairies. Cosmic Wheel Creamery is a really wonderful creamery down the road from us, and they give us fresh cheese curds, and then we move into the aged cheeses as the year progresses. And all, again, going back to that, what does local food taste like? What's the terroir of Polk County?
You told me about Goattober. I thought that was an interesting concept. Maybe share a little bit about that program.
It is. We have a wonderful farmer that we work closely with named Leslie from Ceylon Rolling Acres. She's a goat farmer. And she does a lot of business toward the Twin Cities. Lots of immigrant communities are very familiar with, and there's a higher demand for goat. We're trying to bring it onto the main menu in a small town that might not be as familiar with goat. So we generally do have a goat dish on our menu, but we're able to really promote and highlight goat in Goattober, right? So last year, or the year before the pandemic, I should say, we had a featured farmer dinner. We brought the farmer in, and we featured a multi-course meal around a large table with the farmer at the head of the table, and ate together and talked about her farming values and practices. And everybody, I think, either gained or enhanced their appreciation of goat.
Thanks, Laura. And I would encourage any audience members, if you have questions for one or more of our panel members, to please put those into the chat. Another success story, Seyoum, you talked about a microloan program. Do you want to maybe share a little bit about that work and how that was a success for the people and communities that you were engaging?
Yeah, yes, thank you, Krista. Well, I guess my main job as a state program is to really approach communities, as I said, rural or urban. And the first thing I do is really listen very well, understand what the need is for businesses. So my work really goes very much in supporting small businesses. And once I understand the need, what I usually do is kind of align the resources we have as a state. And a lot of people think it's only financial, but it's also our network has an outreach of different organizations that can bring in their skill set to support those communities and those organizations I work with. So one of the main things we found out through listening was that small businesses need access to capital, as well as they need the technical assistance to support them in terms of putting together their businesses in the right way. So having that input from the community and then working with the organizations, we established with the key organizations to kind of specifically be supportive of some cultural differences or language barriers to be taken care of by Asian communities, by African American, by Hispanic, and the Native American. That helped us to kind of have them as a bridge, but also it was very important for us to help them get the skill set in terms of running revolving loan fund. One of the success, I think, is for all of you that are participant here, what I found the success was collaboration. So you can't expect small organizations to have everything under their belt or to have the fund to really have everything in-house. So as you know, in running a micro loan, you need underwriters, you need people that are able to close the loan and do the contract, which has some legal wordings and importance to take care of. And then over the years of the loan servicing, some of us, we have our own home mortgage and other things that we are used to in working. So my, again, network was able to say, okay, let's have a loan review committee and let's invite bankers, financial institutions, some lawyers, some accountants, and they were very happy to participate and volunteer with these chambers and organizations to be part of a loan review committee and to support local businesses. We now have businesses, for example, working with the Native Americans throughout the tribes, serving off the reservation and on the reservation, small businesses, if there are the Hmong communities in rural areas of Wisconsin, farmers and grocery stores. So we were able to develop this kind of small micro programs helping small businesses. And over the years now, we have very strong organizations. We started a community of 12 organizations as a coalition. We now have 18 and kind of cover statewide. And the beauty about that is that once institutions saw the well-organized programs, we start to have investors. So not only, the state has a limited budget, but that was leveraged very well by the private sector. So I always look at the private and public collaboration. And as I said, not only on the financial side, but the skill set they bring to everyone and to the community.
You're really a connector of resources, if you will. You talked about listening to understanding the needs of the community, and then through your network, being able to provide resources depending on what their needs. So I think that's a great example of working together to connect resources in the communities and maybe from beyond. John, I wanted to take it over to you because I know you've got some unique success stories from rural areas, but maybe not rural in the traditional definition. Do you want to maybe talk about some of the success stories that you have witnessed and been been involved with Puentes Bridges?
Sorry, my other phone rang. If you bear with me, I'll just tell you a story. One of the first times we went to Mexico to visit the families of our employees, we traveled to a town called Orizaba. And one of my former employees, Roberto Montalvo, who had just gone home, picked me up in Orizaba and in a van, and we drove up the mountain to where he lived, a couple hours in a very rural area, in a very poor area of Mexico. And I noticed when I got into the village, we got in very late at night, and the next morning I was walking around his house, and he had built a bakery. And what struck me, being an entrepreneur and being a business person, was that the business plan that he had designed for his bakery was flawed. There was no road, so we had to walk to the village. So he would have to carry the flour down to the bakery and then bake whatever he wanted to bake, and then carry it back up the mountain to a larger town called Otacinca. And that really bothered me because he had worked for me for 3 years, and I should have known this. I should have given him some training in entrepreneurship. So after that Puentes trip, we went home, and I discussed it with the other founder, Sean Duvall. And so we put together a program where we offered entrepreneurship training to our employees, anybody that wanted it, the employees from Mexico. And a couple of guys took it. One of them was Pascasio, a guy named Dr. Greg Hadley from UW River Falls, a teacher, drove down to our farm, hour and a half, I think once a month, for quite a few months to teach this entrepreneurship class. And then eventually Pascasio went home, and I didn't think much about it, but I felt good about it that I at least had done that. And in another trip that we went down there recently, one of the people on the trip, the cell phone didn't work right. So they went to the local cell phone store in Talkeetna, and they got talking and stuff. And the guy at the cell phone store asked, her name was Mercedes, where are you from? She says, well, I live in a little town called Wamandee. And he said, well, I used to work in Wamandee, and small world. And she asked him, well, where did you work? And he said, he worked at our farm. And here it was Pascasio. And when I was down there, and I had to go to the store then, of course, to see Pascasio. And we asked him, did the entrepreneurship class help you at all? He says, that's exactly why I have these cell phone stores. And now he has 3 of them, and his brother works in them, and he works in them. So it is prosperity for them, the people that work there, but it also provides kind of an explanation that if you do good to people, you get rewarded. And I think that's what the Puentes Bridges program brings to rural Wisconsin.
Thanks, John. I appreciate you sharing the story, and I'm glad to see you got an assistant helping you out with today's panel.
He has to be on my lap.
As long as he doesn't chase the calves in the background there, we'll be good, right?
That's right.
I wanted to go into the next question. We'll talk a little bit more about COVID-19 in just a little bit, but each of you have likely had some challenges in starting the work, and I'd like to learn a little bit about what you've learned from those challenges that you face in doing the work that you do. And maybe, John, let's turn it back to you. And talk about working with different cultures. That can be a challenge. What have you learned, and how have you overcome some of those challenges?
Well, when the COVID thing hit last spring, I remember going to the Hy-Vee store in Winona, which is very close to us, on a Sunday in March, and there was nothing on the shelves. I mean, all the canned goods were gone. They were empty, and this is a huge store. And it was a shock to the system that their food system could be affected. And so Puentes Bridges, the organization that I'm representing here today, wasn't able to travel to Mexico. It was the first time that we haven't been able to make that trip. And that kind of affected us a little bit. But so what our employees did to meet the challenge was they couldn't go anywhere either. And that culture, they were just as afraid of COVID as we were. And it was really, really important that everybody stayed safe and stayed, because we have to milk the cows. We have to milk them every day, all the time. And so we can't have everybody getting COVID. So everybody on our place, they basically stayed home. They just worked a lot. They made a lot more money because they were working a lot more, because there was really no need to have time off to go do something, because there was nothing to do. And we fixed things, and we did a whole bunch of things. The COVID relief that we got from the government made it a very lucrative year. And what was important then was that we share this with our employees. So we were able to give bonuses to all of our employees based on all the money that we were getting, and over and above our business. And so I think it provided a little prosperity for the local area because people did things more locally. Roberto Tecpili, who's here now, and one of our only guys that speaks English, and he took up golf. And so Roberto and I play golf every Monday night. Our rule is whoever wins the front nine has to buy, and we buy Pepsis. He has regular Pepsi and me a Diet Pepsi. And then we play 18 holes, and we do that every Monday night until Christmas. And we did the same thing last year. So you do what you have to do.
Thanks, John. Laura, I wanted to turn to you. You have got local food, and local food sometimes it costs a little bit more. How do you overcome the challenge of people saying it's too expensive? What do you do to address that as a challenge in your business model?
Thanks. It's a good question, especially in the restaurant industry. Margins are really tight, even for restaurants that rely on more industrial food at scale. So we're doing it pretty differently. We're getting in the raw product, and then we're using a lot of labor in-house to turn those proteins and the produce and the fruits into things that are delicious and served to our customers on our menu. So to tell the story of local food, we have a few different tools. We communicate the importance of local food and the value of local food through our menu. So when folks are even just at the point of deciding what kind of soup they might want to order, they might read a little bit about the farmer that produced the main ingredient in that soup. And our servers are also trained and educated to have conversations with people about various items and sources that we feature on our menu. So back to the Goattober example, our servers get a lot of questions about goat. What does it taste like? Who grows it? How do you prepare it? So the servers are able to communicate that. And then we have a lot of education around the restaurant too on the walls, and we push out education through programming and through our newsletter and social media. So if you follow us on Instagram or Facebook, you'll find out a lot about, who produced the cheese that's being featured on the cheese board that week and things of that nature. And then people understand that there's a story and there are people behind the food that they're choosing, and then they can understand the value and are happy to pay accordingly.
So transitioning that now to a COVID-19 environment where people are not coming into the restaurant, how did you pivot and to provide that education and training?
We pivoted our offerings and really focused on things that people could take home with them. So deli style food or frozen take and bake items. Our chicken pot pie has become one of our signature items, and that's been great. We're able to tuck information into those orders that we send out with people. We have an impact statement, which we call the gratitude report, that talks about what we've accomplished in terms of local food. We tuck that into the bag that people receive when they take food away. And we also have little mission cards, we call them. So if somebody orders a cheeseburger, we can play the card that explains the importance of grass-fed beef to health, to the environment, to the economy, and similarly with some other aspects of the way we prepare food, like preservation and other special ingredients like heritage grains, for example. So whether they're sitting in the restaurant face-to-face or they're unpacking their bag of take and bake and deli items or hot items to go, they get the same information.
And you also turned to some virtual programming too, right?
We did, yes. About a year ago, we ceased all in-person programming and moved entirely online. And we've been really successful and really thankful that people have followed us into the virtual world. And we'll continue to do virtual programming indefinitely. And we're happy to bring back in-person programming little by little too.
Thanks, Laura. Well, Gary, we haven't heard from you yet. I know that you talked about some challenges that you identified in the Farm Bill and some of the food programs and the types of food and how that fits with the cultural preferences in your community. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and some of the work that you're doing in that area?
Yeah, in the in the 2018 Farm Bill, we've had the most provisions ever regarding Native American farmers, agriculturalists, and foresters, and in education. So one of the provisions that especially speaks to rural prosperity is under the Farm Bill, for our food distribution program, they have created what they call using the Indian Self-Determination and Education Act of 1975. It basically is a Indian self-determination contracting. Like if they were going to provide tribal police assistance here, law enforcement under this bill, we can come back and say, well, let us contract to provide that law enforcement. We'll use the monies that what you would have done here, Bureau of Indian Affairs, federal monies, but we'll provide it. And we don't get a penny more or a penny less, but we provide that. So using that same premise, we said under the food assistance program, under FNS, we said, can we use that type of contracting to be able to purchase and select the vendors ourselves for food that comes normally into our food distribution program? And the reason we want to do this is severalfold. Number one, we want to buy food and set up contracts so we can build that infrastructure with our tribal vendors, as well as for those that we know also are using organic and sustainable methods that maybe are not Native American. So we're trying to build on that certain type of clientele that provides those services. And many times they don't have that infrastructure in place, because you're looking at a distribution and supply chain that currently doesn't exist for many of our indigenous farmers. So we're trying to build that. We can use that funding to supplement existing food products with the same type of nutrition. And I tell you, there are a lot of foods as indigenous people that we've had and a lot of our elders prefer. And at one time we had, and that's what we're doing then. We're slowly creating that switch to a supply chain that now allows our producers to grow more food, or we can purchase from those who we know that are not native, that also believe in that same type of producing and production. So we're looking at recreating that system, even making sure we get all of our legal infrastructure in place, as well as just upping these production. So we believe this is going to be that next step within increasing that Farm Bill allocation from what this pilot program is now. So we see this as helping all of the smaller communities and tribal communities in Wisconsin.
Seyoum, did you have something to add?
Yeah, something similar to what Gary is saying as well. In our dealing with supporting the tribal communities, I work with 4 Native organizations that are economical development organizations, and a very similar thing is, so we do every year tour of the 11 tribes and bring resource information to the tribal communities. And one of the things we learned was this kind of thing what Gary is addressing in terms of having an opportunity within the reservations, having their own business programs. And this year, actually, we are working with the native organizations that we work with to create an enterprise program. It's a revolving loan fund for tribal enterprises. So the tribes are communities, and they have everything that is needed in any city or county. There's roads, you need a gas station, you need a bakery, you need the food, things that we are, all of us, addressing here. If we could try to support them and create enterprises within the communities and have businesses developed from that. So again, after listening, that is one thing that was very much important, and I'm very happy to say that that will be launched in the next 2 months.
Thanks, Seyoum. John, COVID-19 certainly impacted the travel that you typically do with Puentes Bridges, but you turned your efforts to some advocacy work. Do you want to maybe talk about why that's important and how that impacts rural communities for some of the advocacy work that you were doing during COVID-19?
Well, one of the things that happened a lot because of the Puentes Bridges program was people found that what we were doing was unique. We were promoting the good things that immigrants do, and especially in rural Wisconsin. We did a kind of a study, and it's not scientific, and I wouldn't be able to defend it in paper or something like that. But probably 80% of the milk in the state of Wisconsin is harvested by immigrants. There's a lot of large farms, and that's where a lot of the milk is coming from. And almost in all of those farms, the immigrants are doing the milking. And so we have a workforce that has transformed the dairy industry in the state of Wisconsin. And so somebody has to speak up for these people. And they are vilified sometimes in political arenas. But they're just really wonderful people, and people that you want living next to you, people that you want to work beside. And so what we've tried to do is highlight that stuff. When we started the Puentes Bridges program, we said we want immigration, which was just starting at that time, especially in rural Wisconsin. We wanted it to be a good experience rather than a bad experience. So we've tried to do that, and by promoting different things, but it attracted a lot of interest. We had a documentary made about us from the Dutch PBS company. It was 40 minutes long. It was shown in Holland. I was coming back from a vacation in Florida, and I was in the Fort Lauderdale airport. And a lady came up to me and she says, "I'm Dutch. And I saw that documentary and I want a selfie." So we had a selfie, but it was all having to do with trying to put a face on immigrants. And they aren't this group of people or that group of people. They are Roberto, they're Juan, they're Severo, they're Federico. They're individual people that are trying to make a better life for their families back home, which is exactly what the rest of us did, or our ancestors did when we migrated to Wisconsin years and years ago. I'm a 5th generation dairy farmer. My ancestors migrated here. They were very, very poor, and they worked hard. And our guys have done the same thing. And I've been able, luckily, to be able to witness that, see it at home, at their places back in Mexico. Been to DC multiple times to talk to the legislatures to try to make some of these laws and some of these attitudes change a little bit.
I want to turn a little bit to looking at opportunity. I think this ties to one of the questions that came in about rural prosperity and how we grow. So I want to look a little bit to the future and talk a little bit more about opportunities and how you are working on some of the opportunities. I mean, one of the things we talk about Wisconsin being strong is because of its diversity, and that can mean cultural diversity, geographic diversity. How do we make diversity an opportunity rather than an obstacle?
I can try to address that. A lot of farmers like me are not young anymore, and there aren't as many people wanting to farm anymore. We still all have to eat. The land still has to be worked. The cows still have to be milked, and we can't just make the whole state a national park. So we need people. We need people to do the work, and we have a group of people in the state of Wisconsin that are living and working on these farms that provide a huge opportunity for the state. And if we as a group, and there's a lot of wonderful programs out there that try to get people to become farmers and lots of education, stuff like that. And we try to kind of what I call grease the skids so that young people will slip into these positions or into this education so that they would continue the tradition of working on farms. But there's so many other opportunities that doesn't seem to be working as well anymore. But what we also have is a lot of impediments to people that really want to do this. And that would be impediments for immigrants to go to school, drive around. So if we somehow, all those wonderful organizations that do wonderful things, if they could somehow recognize that immigrants are a real big part of our society and a real big part of rural prosperity, and make it so that it's easy. Let's grease the skids for the immigrants as well, rather than creating barriers. And I think the future, what it looks like, and what I'm going to try to do on our farm is I want my immigrant employees to take over the farm someday, and I'm going to grease the skids as much as I can and make that happen. And I think that's, if we're looking down the road, I think that's a huge opportunity that rural Wisconsin and rural agriculture can participate in.
Gary, you talked about some opportunities in partnering with other organizations that have similar values. Do you want to maybe talk about how you're connecting with some of those organizations as you look to opportunities for rural prosperity in your community?
Yeah, and I might say regarding the diversity attributes also, that as we come into this time now where we are seeing that maybe the dollar, there's only so much profit somebody can make without impacting the environment, and somewhere we got to negotiate that middle ground of how to take care of that environment. I think now there's a chance for many other types of organic or sustainable gardening, and in our case, much of it is even logging. We have a 250,000 acre forest, and it's a premier forest in the world, one of those type of forests. And now we believe more people will see that and say, well, how do you have more dense lumber and higher quality lumber now than 150 years ago? And you've cut the equivalent of 2.5 times the total volume off the reservation, because we don't high grade, we low grade. We cut the lower quality out on certain sections each year. We think those types of approaches now will be more acceptable. So in diversity, you're starting to look now at all the different things that are happening, and maybe there's some gems through this diversity, because what we're using now may or may not work. But as you were talking, we also agree with that in what we are doing. as we work with different tribal communities, and we work with trying to develop cooperatives, not only in areas like industrial hemp, but also in developing a true food code that deals with organic and sustainable food systems. We look and we find sometimes what might seem like strange bedfellows, odd bedfellows, but really we find out that we all want certain good things to come, and by working together, we find that we have a lot of advantages. One of the things we are trying to work with is with entities like Feeding Wisconsin, Feeding America, and some of the grant opportunities to really look at how we can take what they offer as far as their technical assistance, how they work distribution centers, and really work that into what we are developing. So there are many, many things like that are out there, and DATCAP and USDA have stepped forward, and slowly now, because this department is that point person for many of what is offered, we're finding that we have a lot of opportunities available to us. And as I'm hearing from Seyoum, I'm probably going to be giving him a call also. So.
Thank you. We've got just a few minutes left. What I might suggest is maybe each of you can offer your 1 to 2 suggestions for what panel members, what people can do in their own community to make sure that they are helping to grow their rural prosperity in their area. So we'll go around on my screen. Seyoum, you're the first one up. So what's your 1 or 2 suggestions that you might offer to people on how they can impact positive rural prosperity?
Again, I'll come back to what I mentioned earlier in passing. To me, first is foremost listening to the people you want to try to serve and understand the need properly from their side, rather than you coming in and try to tell people this is the best way. I think John mentioned Laura and Gary. I think we are all saying, so listening is important. And then, as I said, collaboration is important. Don't always focus on the financial support. Financial for sure is important, but as well the in-kind and tapping into skill sets of other organizations and bringing them. They will be your ambassadors. They will promote what you are doing and bring in a lot of leverage on the limited resources you have.
Thank you, Seyoum. John, your top tips.
I think it's fairly simple. What my tip is anyway, let's embrace diversity and let's promote it. And we can stand out as a state if we would embrace the diverse population that we have in the state and then help them succeed.
Gary, your suggestion?
I think the idea that we're all in this together. When we look at the human sickness now, the coronavirus pandemic, when we look at the supply chain and the food and the processes and the emergencies and the awakenings we've had with this, I think climate change is the next sickness coming, and that's going to be the world sickness. We have a human sickness with this COVID. This is just a warm up, and excuse that pun, but this is a warm up for the climate change sickness that is coming. So Wisconsin needs to lock elbows and work with each other, because there will be disruptions in the food chain, and some of those bigger sources from Florida and Arizona, California, those are going to be disrupted. How will we react to that is up to us. So we need to come together. So that's what we need to do. We have to embrace each other.
Thanks, Gary. And we are at time. If you didn't catch it, Laura, I think your comment in the chat probably is what you would say for your comment: buy local, know your farmer. And with that, we're out of time and we need to wrap up so that we can respect the next panel that's coming after us. But I do want to say thank you to each of our panel members for engaging in this dialogue. I appreciate you all, and thank you very much. And